Good evening, everyone. So we're at 4:32. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And this is a special council meeting this evening. I'm looking for any declaration of conflict of interest. And I don't see anybody waving that they are. So we'll move on. I just need an adoption of the published agenda for a special council meeting for May the 17th. And that is moved by Councillor Bjorkman, supported by Councillor Bowman. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we'll go right into presentations. We have Mr. Jim Berzizi. I hope I have that name correct.
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, thank you. So Mr. Berzizi from BMA Management Consulting, Inc., and he is going to take us through our 2021 user fee study. And I think Mr. Morrison wants to say a word first.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, I just wanted to give a brief kind of introduction and background into the process. So Jim over at BMA Consulting the RFP was actually closed January 22nd, 2021. So this has been an ongoing study. It started and the collection was happening and then COVID hit. So Jim and his colleagues were kind enough to put a pause on it for us and we could revisit at a later date. So once the original lockdowns were lifted and I don't want to say it became normal because I don't know if it is normal yet. But once those lockdowns were lifted, we reinitiated and continued. So this has been a big project and I appreciate the flexibility from his team. I also appreciate the flexibility from all the departments within town of Essex. As you can see by the number of individuals on this meeting, it pretty much touched every division. So a lot of work went into it, a lot of collaboration and a lot of input. So it was appreciated. And we have Jackson here also because Jackson had stepped up and he project managed this and managed the project and dealing with the consultant directly. And we appreciate his value and Kate and her finance team. So on that note, it's been over a year in the making and we're excited to be here. So.
Thank you, Jeff, for that introduction. And now I guess I will pass it over to Mr. Berzizi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe somebody is going to be calling up the presentation here, Ken. Okay, yeah, so as Jeffrey mentioned, we undertook the comprehensive study of fees and charges. And so if you go to maybe slide 3, just by introduction. So the purpose of the study was to ensure that the fees charged represent the true cost of providing the services within the town. So these user fees, there's a direct beneficiary of the service. So it's important that at least council understands the full cost of providing that service, because if the user of the service doesn't provide that full cost, obviously, then it falls back to the general tax base. So the review included user fees in a number of areas. You can see that planning, building, bylaw enforcement, finance, legislative services, IT, cemeteries, water, wastewater, and public works. So it covered pretty much all of the departments within the corporation. The next slide, please. So in terms of our process, actually, if you can go back one, sorry. In terms of the process, we undertook what we call a bottom-up approach. So what we've done is we reviewed each of the departmental budgets, all of the where all the fees were represented. We had interviews with the key staff members in each of the departments that undertook the services that were provided to the ratepayers. We then, the staff in each of the department, the frontline staff, developed what we call process map, and this is used to support the fee calculations. In essence, what the process map is that we identified, or the staff identified, each of the activities to carry out the function. And based on each of the activities, they also told us who the staff member was that undertook those activities and approximately how long to undertake the activity. So as I say, it's a bottom-up approach. So it's the frontline staff members that essentially provided the information to us to support the fee calculation. We undertook an activity-based costing exercise, and that's to include all of the direct and indirect costs of providing that service. And the other thing is we estimated productive hours for each of the staff members to come up with an hourly calculation, a charge out hourly calculation. And what I mean by productive hours is we took the total available number of annual hours, and we deducted from that non-productive hours, which are essentially things like sick leave, an approximation of sick leave, vacation pay, those type of items where staff aren't available to perform the service. And the net result of that is what we call productive hours. And those productive hours were divided by the annual salaries and benefits of each of the employees to come up with an hourly calculation for each employee. We looked at cost allocation methodologies. You have cost allocations, corporate cost allocations to each of the functions. We wanted to make sure that they were reasonable and in line with leading practices. And then we calculated the fees based on that information in compliance with all the relative legislative and regulatory requirements of each of the areas. And then finally, once we came up with a fee calculation, we did a benchmarking exercise and we looked at the fee calculation in comparison to your surrounding municipalities. Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of the guiding principles, one of the first guiding principles, the fee for service would be set to reflect the efficient cost of carrying out the service. And then the second guiding principle, fairness and equity, the intent is to charge a fee to the applicants who receive the direct benefit, a direct beneficiary of the service. And as again, I go back to the point that if you didn't do that, the resultant charges that weren't collected from the user fee would fall on the tax base. And then secondly, the full cost of service would be included in the calculation. And the full cost, again, is the direct and indirect costs. So that's there could be departmental overhead distributed. And then there's corporate overhead as well, included in the indirect costs. And then also, some of the departments have use of capital assets, and we use that also to provide the basis of the calculation of the user fee. So that's the, if we go to the next slide, that's the kind of the background, and we undertook a similar approach for each of the user fees in each of the departments. So now I'll get into some of the specific areas. The first area is building permit fees. And if we go to the next slide. So the legislation with regard to building permit fees is that it's under the Building Code Act, and it requires that permit fees not exceed the anticipated reasonable cost to administer and enforce the building code during construction. So we want to make sure, again, that we're looking at reasonable costs, anticipated reasonable costs to enforce the building code. So if we go to the next calculation. So we looked at the activity, and you can see from this chart, the building activity over the last 3 years has escalated dramatically. And it's gone from, in 2017, you had about $23 million in building activity. And in 2020, it went up almost 4.5 times, and you had about $104 million in building activity. So you can see that it has been trending up since 2016 or 17 rather. And there's been some significant increases over the last 3 years. So if we go to the next slide, we then looked at, okay, well, what are the revenues you've been collecting over those years? And how do they compare with the total expenditures And you can see from this chart, if you go back to 2016, where your building activity wasn't as great as it was in 2020, your expenditures exceeded your revenues. And in the case of 2020, where you had tremendous building activity, your revenues exceeded, it's the only year it exceeded the total expenditures. In the case of the building department, you have a kind of a prudent approach in the sense that rather than all of those deficits being charged to the taxpayers, you've established a building permit stabilization reserve. And the intent of that reserve is to cover off costs in periods of low economic activity, building construction activity. And then in the case of high building construction activity, that's used to replenish the reserve. So as you can see on this chart, the blue line, which represents the permit revenues, and the red line, which represents expenditures. Again, the only time it exceeded the revenues exceeded the expenditures was in 2020. So the intent of our calculation is to bring the town's targeted revenue recovery to 100% of expenditures. So next slide. So as I say, you have established a building permit reserve. So we looked at the activity and the ending balance of the building permit activity, building permit stabilization reserve. And you can see in 2015, you had a reserve had a negative balance of about 239,000. It went as high in 2018 to 319,000. So again, your current building charges for permits under the current scenario is not sustainable. You did have, however, a surplus in 2020, but that was, again, you had tremendous building permit activity. So at the end of 2019, your deficit in that reserve was about $278,000. So on average, over that 5-year period, the revenues only recovered about 81% of the expenditures. And that resulted in, again, a deficit in that reserve position of about $278,000. Next slide, please. So we looked at the budget, and you can see from the budget, the majority of the expenditures, salaries and wages, is about $334,000, which represents about 57% of the budget. You have corporate costs. Oh, by the way, the salaries and wages in building is only the salary and wages related to the building operations, and does not include the services provided to Bylaw. And then you have corporate overheads of about 124,000. You implemented a new e-permitting system, and that results in a budget of about 32,000 each year. So if we go to the next slide. So on that basis, again, we looked at the process map staff provided to us. We did the calculation of the productive hours. We looked at the budgets, and we calculated the fees. And the fee calculation, this is for residential, all finished floors. Your current charge is about 90 cents per square foot. Based on the information, again, the process map that was provided to us, the charge should be about $1.14. So you can see you were at in comparison to other municipalities, you were the lowest. You are, if you approve this recommendation, you would become the highest, but just slightly above the average. It's only about 4 cents per square foot above the average. And the other thing to note on this is that the fees of the comparator municipalities, they may not, in fact, be covering the full cost of services. And there could be some differentials in terms of service levels as well. So the next slide is, so the recommended building permit fees, they'll continue to be competitive with your surrounding municipalities. And it's anticipated that it would be 100% cost recovery for the building operations. So if we go to the next slide, so the building department has a number of different areas of charges. And you can see from this chart, what we've done is we've showed in the chart the existing fees. Just to give you an example, if we go across the assembly and institutional, right now you're charging $10 per $1,000 of construction value. And we're recommending $1.70 per square foot. We feel that on a per square footed basis, it's a bit better proxy for determining the amount of effort that's required to do the building permit review and the inspections. So rather than charging on a construction value, we're recommending that it be changed to a square footage basis, similar to the other property types. So if you look at residential, as I said, it went from 90 cents to $1.14. Decks and porches, the change here is you're charging 32 cents a square foot. Again, you know, the size of the deck isn't necessarily the contributing factor of the cost. So it's more appropriate for things like that to charge a flat charge. And in that case, we're recommending a flat charge of about $96. And I won't go through in detail. I'll just highlight some of the major changes. The pools, swimming pools near the bottom of the residential, right now your current charge is $60 for any type of pool. And we recognize that an in-ground pool has a greater degree of effort than above ground pool, for example. So we're recommending a separate fee for an in-ground pool and continuing with the above ground pool fee as well. Another new category is farm building renovations rate, and we're recommending 25 cents a square foot. So you can see the fees in the other categories, the increases. And maybe if you go to the next slide for a second. So in the case of plumbing, you can see the increase for new construction. In terms of plumbing renovations, this is another change. Right now you're charging on a per unit basis, and the number of fixtures in each of the units is it varies, and it could vary quite substantially. So a better proxy for charging the fees is, rather than $150 a unit, is to charge on a per fixture basis. And it's more transparent to the person that gets the permit as well. They know how many fixtures, and having a fixture charge is more relevant to the degree of effort to do the plumbing reviews. And in the case of plumbing, we're also recommending a minimum of $64. A new fee that was staff advised that they undertake reviews of backwater valves, and currently there's no fee, so we're recommending $96 a unit. And the same thing with storm sanitary sewer protections, a new fee in that regard. In terms of on-site sewage systems, staff also recognize that there's different types of systems that it's more appropriate to have a separate fee for. So a tertiary system, $850. Septic repairs to an existing system, it's about $388. And then the inspections and reviews and assessments, $96. In the case of demolitions, right now you have one charge for demolitions for both residential and non-residential. And it's recognized that reviewing non-residential demolitions is a little bit more effort from the staff. So we're proposing a separate fee for residential and a separate demolition fee for non-residential. So if you go to the next slide. Lawyers' letters, quite often they're requested. Currently, there's no fee for that, but obviously there's a degree of effort from the staff. So recommending $64 for lawyers' letters. Most municipalities do have a fee for lawyers' letters. Change of use permit. Right now it's on a per square foot basis. It's more appropriate to have a flat rate for change of use. Tents, there's currently no charge for that in the current fee structures. So we're recommending $96. The next one, revised plan review. The degree of effort in reviewing revised plans in some cases gets quite substantial and time consuming. And it's not fair to the rest of the industry that because there's a problem with somebody's plan review, that everybody should subsidize that. So we're recommending that you establish a revised plan review with a minimum of $192. And again, this would act as a deterrent to make sure that the plans that are submitted to the building department are in accordance with the current standards, and it doesn't waste staff time. Transfer permits, you can see the charges on that. The next one, inspection fee. Again, we're recommending a charge for re-inspection. A lot of times the inspector, what we're notified of, the inspector goes out for an inspection, but it's not ready for the inspection. And so it's just a waste of time for the inspectors. So again, as a deterrent to builders not abiding by the what they're supposed to be doing, to have a fee to deter them from requesting an inspection when it's not ready. A new fee for inspections for Ontario Renovate program, and then some fees if you're starting construction without a permit. There should be a penalty for those in those regards, and then new fees for solar panels. And then there, you can see that there's fees for the various certificates as well. So that pretty comprehensive list in the building department in terms of user fees. That's the list. Maybe if we go to the next slide, just to kind of wrap up this area. Oh, sorry, there's additional fees. The re-inspection, the residential agriculture, new additions, the $1,000 we're recommending in that regard. Driveway approach, there's currently no fee. We're recommending $1,000 in that regard. And these are the deposits, sorry. And then you can see the rest of the deposits that are required. So if you go to the next slide. Yeah, actually that wraps up the building department. I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, if it's appropriate to stop now and let council ask questions for building, or I can complete the presentation, whatever you prefer.
Thank you. Any questions from councillors? You must be doing a great job. Oh, Councillor Van der Dolen.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I've my internet's still been a little bit blipping out on me, some intermittent. $96 for what kind of tents?
Temporary structures, temporary tents. Like large temporary structures that probably doesn't happen very often in your municipality.
Oh, okay. And thank you for that. And further, just an observation that I can't disagree with anything except perhaps charging $96 for a backwater valve. I assuming you mean a backflow valve?
That could be, and I'll maybe ask Kevin Carter if he can explain that.
Because it just seems to me that that's something we really, really badly want everyone to install.
Right.
And to penalize them $100 on top of the plumber's fees and the digging and the installation of it, it just seems greedy, and I think we're going to get less of the result we want. I don't know. That's one I would question.
Okay, so we'll get Mr. Carter to clarify, please.
Through your chair, that is for the water line coming into commercial buildings. It's a backflow prevention for we don't contaminate our potable water.
So it's just commercial industrial?
Yeah, it's not required on the line in residential, so it would be agricultural, ICI, institutional, commercial, industrial.
I take it back. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any further, Mr. Brzezzi. So if you want to proceed.
Yes, thank you. So the next area is the planning fees. And if we go to the next slide, so yeah, if we can go to the next slide. Yeah, thanks. So Section 69 of the Planning Act allows municipalities to impose fees through a bylaw. The Planning Act does stipulate that the fees be designed to meet, again, only the anticipated cost to provide the service. And the recommended fees that we're proposing is based on the principle of full cost recovery. So we looked at the revenues that are generated from the current planning fees, and we looked at 2018 and 2019. And you can see in 2018, you collected about $79,000 in planning fee revenues, and then in 2019, you collected about $85,600. So we undertook exactly the same process that I just described on building and generally. And so based on the activity levels, when we projected the current activity levels, when we projected our planning fees that we're recommending, the proposed fees would generate an additional $13,000 in revenues. So if we go to the next slide. So this is the planning fees. They're pretty straightforward. I think in comparison to the existing fees, you can see slight increases in a lot of the fees. Official plan stayed the same. You didn't have an official plan amendment application in the last couple of years. You do have a change of consent, new fee, change of consent conditions, a minor request and a major request, $250 for the minor and $400 for the major. And then deferred committee of adjustment application, recommending $400 fee. Right now, there's currently no fee for that. I'm sorry, $110, there's no fee for that. And I think the rest of them are pretty straightforward. If we go to the next slide. So what we did is as I say, we undertook the benchmarking. We looked at each of the types of applications just to see where you are in comparison to the surrounding municipalities. So you can see the official plan amendment, there was no change being recommended. It coincidentally worked out to the same fee as you currently have. So you were above the average, and you continue to be above the average for that particular application. And like I say, there hasn't been an application in a couple of years for that, at least a couple of years. So the next slide is the zoning bylaw amendment for major. Right now, you can see in the yellow, your existing is below the median and below the average. And the recommended proposed for a zoning bylaw amendment, major zoning bylaw amendment, just puts you about at the average of the surrounding municipalities. The next slide. Minor bylaw amendment. You can see your existing is below the average and the median, and the proposed is also slightly below. The next one. Site plan control. Again, the existing and the proposed are both slightly below the average. Next slide. Site plan amendment, major. Your existing fee and proposed fee, there was no change in that regard. So you were above the average and you continue to be slightly above the average. Next slide is the consent to sever. And you can see the existing fee increases, and in comparison to other municipalities, you're approximately at the average. Complex minor variances, you're slightly, the proposed fee is slightly, brings you slightly above the average. Next slide. Holding removal, you'd be at the median below the average. And then the next slide. Yeah, so that's the planning fees. So I can stop there if you want to ask any questions with regard to planning fees.
Bondi.
Thank you, Chair Malash. We never got to it in the Development Services Roundtable, but with all the work the Committee of Adjustment members do for us and how I think it's really important that they visit each variance, minor variance, major variance, or that this report doesn't take into the account if we were to pay the mileage, right? Because I also believe that if we were to pay the mileage, it should come out of the application fee.
You're directing the question to me? Or was that a comment?
But it is a question. I mean, we didn't pass it as a council those committee members should get mileage, but if we're looking at cost recovery, if we set this tonight, then we've missed all opportunity to compensate those members for all the work that they do for us.
Yeah, just to respond, yeah, what we did is this is this is based on the current budget, which if it doesn't include the mileage fees, there could be a slight adjustment upward in that regard.
Further questions? Mr. Aberzizi? You
Okay.
may proceed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the other user fees, if we go to the next slide, bylaw enforcement. So when a person fails to obey the compliance order, the municipality may remedy the violation directly and recover its costs. And a municipality may establish a system of administrative penalties to help the municipality in promoting compliance with its bylaws. And if the penalty or the recovery costs are not paid, it can be added. Legislation allows you that those costs can be added to the tax roll. So the next slide. So in terms of the bylaw infractions, right now, these are the type of fees that are charged: clean yard, snow clearing, weed control, property standards order, an application for noise exemption. And right now you're charging $54 an hour plus a 20% admin fee. We're recommending that it should be about $123 based on the full cost per hour, and a minimum of $123 an hour with a minimum of $123. And the administrative fee for a second infraction and any other additional infractions of the above noted charges within a 12-month period on the same property, that's when those charges would apply. Okay. Not sure if anybody had any questions on that. Okay, so the next one is legislation. Legislation is section 391(1) of the Municipal Act, which stipulates that a municipality can charge for services or activities provided or done on its behalf for costs payable by it for services or activities provided and for the use of the property, including property under its control. So the legislation allows you to charge for certain services. So if you go to the next, so these are the existing and recommended charges for finance and clerks. So you can see there's some slight increases in the proposed fees on most of the areas, and they're not too significant. Okay, the next slide. And then in the case of the clerk's department, you're charging currently for bingo, raffle, and break open tickets. The charge is 2% of the prizes for each of the areas. The legislation allows you to charge up to 3%, but it's been recommended that you continue to only charge the 2%, especially in light of the COVID-19 situation. In terms of marriage licenses, you can see some increases in that regard. Burial permits, slight increase. A new charge is the administering oaths for a resident. Currently, there's no charge. There is a charge for a non-resident, but not a resident. And we're recommending a charge be developed for a resident at $14. Okay. Next slide. And then there's some various charges from for the GIS system, and you can see there's just slight increases in some of those charges, most of those charges. In finance, the annual finance fees generate approximately $29,000 per year, And the increases that we're proposing, the increase in revenues estimated would be marginal. In the case of the clerk's department, it generated about $18,000 a year in user fees. And as I said, it would be marginal increases, and the new fee would be recommended for administrative oaths. Next slide.
Do we charge
So,
HST on top of this?
yep. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Mr. Berzisi, do we charge HST on top of this, or is this
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
any of these fees? Do we charge HST on top of the fee?
Those particular fees, I don't believe there's HST applicable to those.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So the next area is fire. And right now, in the fire department, there's limited fees that relate to the services. And the recommended approach is that user fees should be encouraged if they have the potential to improve public fire and life safety. But one of the big areas is false alarms, and poorly maintained systems result in obviously the unnecessary false alarms and a corresponding emergency response from the fire services. So that's something that you want to avoid. And if it's poorly maintained system and it causes fire services to go out and investigate, there should be a fee to the owner of the property. In utilization of these types of fees is designed that building owners, they should be more inclined to keep the alarm system operational and well maintained. So the next slide. In inspections, inspection requests should be charged. There's a definite beneficiary of the services, so they should be charged to recover the costs associated with providing the service. And then re-inspections, the same thing, user fee should be established for re-inspections. Next slide. So these are the recommended fees in the case of the fire. You can see for the top fire property certificate, it increases from 56. The estimated 100% recovery would bring it up to about $75. Fire property incident report, there's currently no charge for that. I'm recommending $75 for that. And then an increase to the fire property inspection report. Business inspection requiring an inspection. There's currently no charge for that. We're recommending $125. LCBO licensing inspection, there's a new charge being recommended there. Reviewing risk and safety management plans, charge for that. Follow up on inspections on properties after the first re-inspection. So after the second follow-up, it'd be $125 charge, and then $125 thereafter. False alarm after 3 occurrences in a calendar year. Charge the current MTO rates. And then fire extinguisher training, $190, and then training over 20 people, an additional $5 per person. Okay. So moving on to the cemetery. So the Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act, Ontario Regulation 3011, requires every operator of a cemetery provide a price list of all supplies and services prior to entering into a contract for the purchase of interment rights and interment of any human remains. So in accordance with that, we looked at the expenditures and the revenues and the current operations. On the basis of the 2020 budget, the expenditures, total expenditures were about $131,000. And in the case of revenues, the revenues total about $74,000. So there's a net levy to the taxation in 2020, based on the 2020 budget, of almost $57,000. So some of the reason for that, since amalgamation in 1999, Essex, the town, assumed the responsibility for the care and maintenance of 13 cemeteries. And only one of your cemeteries is actively able to offer plots for sale. So if you go to the next slide. So basically the fees, a lot of the fees are legislated, but the fees where you have some discretion on, we're recommending a 10% increase in the care and maintenance fees. And this corresponds to the increase in the contract prices, which were 10%. Interment fees have increased by 2%, just the general inflationary increases, as well as the other ancillary fees associated with the cemetery operations. So if we go to the next, so this is just a summary of the fees. And as I say, lot sales is about a 10% increase. And again, that's to reflect the increase in the contract cost for the maintenance of the cemetery operations. Okay, and if you go to the next slide, so these are some additional fees and marginal, basically inflationary increases associated with most of those. In the case of assisted services, they're legislated, so there's no fee increase being proposed, obviously, for that. And in the case of the marker monument care and maintenance, again, that's legislated, and there's no fee increase associated with that. Okay, so just continuing on then, based on leading practice, municipalities attempt to recover the full cost of service in the water and wastewater operations. And currently there's some of the services that are being provided where there's a direct beneficiary, there is no cost for those services. So we're recommending new user fees for water shutoff during regular hours and after hours, frozen meter repairs, water meter missed appointments, and wastewater inspections. In the case of public works, entrance permits, an increase from $168 to $200, and the driveway aprons is no longer applicable. And then slight increases in the tile drainage inspections and the telecommunications agreement. So that's the end of the presentation, Mr. Chairman. I could answer any more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brzezzi. I'm looking at Mr. Guerin there, if you want to ask the first question.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I'm just trying to find in here, do we do driveways, like residential driveways? I don't see that in here unless I'm missing it. Do we do a permit for residential driveways? That's one, and I got a couple more. Anyone?
There is an entrance permit being recommended at $200. And
yes, through the chair, that is the current fee for a driveway permit, Councillor Guerin, $200.
And did it change or no, it's the same?
I believe that would be the same.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Next one I wanted to ask about was on the, it's page 15 in the report, I believe. It's the various permits have been applied for in 2020 versus 2016 to 2020. I see roof on there. What does roof actually mean? Does that mean if I reshingle my roof, I need to take a permit out?
Sorry, Councillor, what page was that? Or, is that in the building permit section?
On page 15 of your report, it has like various permits that are taking out. In 2020, for example, there was 22 decks or porches permits, and then so on. And then I see roof 14 for 2020 and 12 for other years. What is a roof? Is that a reshingle job or a new roof on a new building?
It's through the chair. Can I jump in? So any questions specific to permits like that, if the directors or your staff could jump in to assist Jim in answering these questions, it would be appreciated.
Thanks, Jeff. The reason I'm asking is because I see the roof looks like a permit's been taken out for them, but I don't see it anywhere in the new fee section anywhere. And I don't know what roof means.
Through your chair, I'm looking at page 15. I don't see this roof.
I was just going to ask Shelley if you can jump to the page so we can see what Councillor Guerin is referring to.
It's on page 13 of the report.
We have
15
15 of the agenda, 15
Yeah.
of the
13
presentation, or 15 of the report.
Yeah, it's 13 on the report, 15 in the agenda report
Of the report or the presentation?
presentation. That's it.
Yeah.
Underneath shed, it says roof.
So through the chair, it's Jeff. What exactly, that's the quantity. So that's the number of permits that were taken out.
Yep. So the question is, I don't see anywhere in the fees for these roofs. I just don't know if it's a reshingled roof and if there's a fee for it or not. Maybe it's a free permit. I don't know. I'm just trying to get some clarification on it. Because I see like under our the permit fees existing and recommended, I see fence, I see in-ground pools, I see that, I just don't see roof.
Through your chair. Okay, with a reshingled of a roof, there is no such thing as a permit. If that helps.
Yeah, that helps. So roof permit would up there might be something different then.
Through your chair, I still don't see roof on page 15.
13.
I don't see roof anywhere.
Page 13, the number of permits.
14 for roof.
Kevin, it's in the report. So Shelley's just got it up right now. Not the presentation, in the report.
Okay.
So I think that's something that maybe we can get back to you, Councillor Guerin.
Yeah, okay. And then the last thing I just wanted was on the fees. So just so I'm clear on this, so a deck permit, now that we're going from a 0.32 per square foot to a flat fee of 96, my calculation's right. A 300 square foot deck previously would have cost $96. And the old way it would have cost a third of that. So it looks like the deck pricing is 2 times more doing it this way. And then the same thing with the shed. A 10 by 10 shed used to cost 100 square feet because $32. Now it's $96. So a 10 by 10 shed would basically be 3 times more permit fee than it is now. It's going from 32 cents a square foot to a flat fee of 96. So a 10 by 10 is 32 square feet. So it's 3 times factor moving forward. I'm just looking for clarification. And that's what I'm thinking it is.
Mr. Morrison?
So through the chair, these fees are calculated for cost recovery, right? So it's the actual labor and the time that goes into it to review and charge for that. So shifting to this model is a true cost recovery model because there's a lot of fluctuations, as you know, as it pertains to for a deck. But this is a true cost recovery model. I don't know if Kevin or Lori has anything to add to that, but that's why there was a shift.
Mr. Carter?
Yes, through you, your chair. A shed, for instance, 10 by 10, you don't require a permit, but anything greater than that, most sheds are 12 by 10, 120 square feet. If we do the math, as Mr. Morrison indicated, it would work out to $40. The time we spend to administer that plan review, type up the permit, process it, collect the money, so forth. It's not, we didn't create enough cost recovery to process that small little permit. So we just bumped it up, flat fee for cost recovery purposes.
Councillor Guerin?
And thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I have no problems with why we're doing it. I'm just pointing out that it is on that factor. It's when I'm talking to people about shed permits or deck permits, and they've gotten them in the past perhaps, or it is a little bit more money. So, and I know why we're doing it. I'm just doing the math on my end, trying to figure out, because some are left as square foot. So I guess it's where it makes sense to recover. We need to recover more. We went to more of a flat fee. I get it.
Through the chair, keep in mind that even though it was based on pennies per square foot for a shed or a deck, there was always at the bottom line here a minimum permit fee of $100. So we categorized everything for cost recovered, flat rate.
And I do see too where smaller projects, we probably weren't getting back the revenues from the time that we were putting in.
That's correct.
Thank you.
But if I could,
Any-
through the chair,
Go
to
ahead,
answer
Mr.
the
Carter.
question regarding roofs, that's reconstruction of faulty roofs, roof alterations and so forth. But again, reshingling a roof, you do not require a permit. So that is structural alterations to roofs.
Thank you again, Mr. Carter. Any further questions? If there's no further questions, we are looking to for a motion from council members to accept the presentation and report that Jim Brzezzi from BMA Management has provided, the 2021 user fee study. Moved by Councillor Guerin and supported by Councillor Bowman. Any questions? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Mr. Brzezzi, thank you very much for this evening. There was a lot of detail here, and we see some changes, and I've seen changes both up and down within the report, mostly up, obviously, but there were some that were looked at and actually came down a little bit. So hopefully this will put us in a better deficit position or going forward. And again, thank you for presenting this evening, and I will pass it over now to Mr. Morrison.
Through the chair. So next step, so this was the presentation and walkthrough where council supports it. Next step will be the bylaw that will come back to council on our regular council agenda.
Thank you very much. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Bondi, supported by Councillor Guerin. And all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And council members, if you just want to stay on, we'll go back from our recess